Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lara Lith, and I'm a water resource specialist with the City of Phoenix. I'm going to make sure that I'm recording. One second. Okay, it is recording. This class is Vegetable Gardening in the Low Desert, and it's a part of our annual webinar series, Hydrate the Valley Phoenix, sponsored by the Phoenix Water Services Department. Charlie Alcorn will be our expert presenter tonight and is presenting on behalf of Watershed Management Group. Tonight's presentation will be recorded, and we're going to upload it to the City of Phoenix YouTube channel and our Save Water website, which you should be directed to at the end of this meeting if you'd like to share it or reference it in the future. We will pause in the middle for a quick break to answer some questions at around the 1 hour mark, I think or halfway through 6:45. But if you have any questions at all throughout the class, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll answer them either halfway through or at the end. So with that, go ahead and take it away, Charlie.
Thanks, Laura. Thank you and welcome everyone to Vegetable Gardening in the Low Desert. I'm Charlie Alcorn. I work with Watershed Management Group, and we're a nonprofit. We're based in Tucson, Arizona, but work throughout the Sonoran Desert, lots of parts of Arizona and northern Mexico. And we're an organization that really focuses on watershed health and community health. We love working, and I get excited about working in urban spaces because the actions we take in urban spaces, the decisions we make have an impact on our larger watershed outside the city. We're all in the Colorado River Basin, and we get awful lot of water from the Colorado River, as well as everyone in Phoenix getting water from the Salt River, SRP. And so, any actions we can do, any education we can provide to help people conserve water and just live more as like stewards of their space, thinking about how do we care for our natural spaces, how do we care for our spaces in our natural spaces in our cities, so that we give to them and then they can give back to us. So vegetable gardening in the low desert. This topic is really fun because for us, we talk a lot about water harvesting, rainwater harvesting, and at a residential scale, rainwater harvesting is a great complement to vegetable gardening. If you've ever seen rain tanks, those tanks that get water from your roof and then hold on to them, those rain tanks are great water supplies for a vegetable garden. And then there's just all other design and planning ideas that incorporate permaculture as well as water harvesting that you can bring into your vegetable gardening planning. And that's what we'll get into tonight. So this class, it's going to have, it's really a beginner class, I'd say. And so there's going to be a lot of like general gardening tips, but everything's going to be with a lens on like, how do we work in our context of being in the desert, very hot place, very limited amount of water. So how do we garden and grow vegetables with that in mind? So things I'm going to talk about tonight are site planning and prep. So preparing your garden for planting, there's an awful lot of thought and intention that can be put into just getting yourself ready and set before you even put plants in the ground. Part two, we'll talk about season and species. So just thinking about what are the ideal times of year to be planting, what are the different things that are going to be happy growing in the winter versus can accommodate or handle growing in the summertime. And then part three, just tips and kind of putting a Sonoran twist on vegetable gardening and growing food in your landscape. Talk about incorporating green practices in your gardening. That'll be splashed throughout the presentation. And then also just identify and recognizing that there's an abundance of food growing in our desert without us bringing in vegetable gardening and tomatoes and peppers from other places. So that's what we'll dive into today or this evening. Gonna get people using the chat some tonight, so hope you're ready to answer some questions, give some feedback. So I'm curious people would use the chat to answer what your experience has been vegetable gardening in the desert. Has anyone given it a shot? Success stories, not success stories, lessons learned, challenges, everything dies. Yeah. That's very deep. Yeah, it's challenging. I've had a lot of failures, vegetable gardening, maybe 50-50 successes and failures out here. So I can speak from experience on that. Anyone else? Decades of gardening in Phoenix, and it's getting harder with the heat. Oh, that's a great observation, right? And especially, yeah, if you've been gardening in Phoenix for years and now are noticing that it's getting more challenging, yeah, we're having hotter summers and longer days with high temperature, or more days with high temperature. I believe it's something like the city of Phoenix experienced 40 days with over 110, no, I think it was 70 days with over 110-degree weather in 2024. So that's hot for us. It's very hot for our veggie gardens, hot for everything, hot for even our native plants are getting stressed out there in the summertime now. Someone said if you want to feel successful, grow zucchini. Yeah, zucchini is, yes, that's a great starting vegetable. And there are other ones that are like low-hanging, I won't say low-hanging fruit, I'll say low-hanging vegetables, ones that are easy to build your confidence with. And there's a season, I think there's seasons that are easier to grow stuff with. Good harvest from November to about May. Just plant, oh, awesome. So you're timing things great. People who are thinking about putting leafy greens in the ground right now, you are spot on. Okay, thanks everyone for using the chat. Appreciate your comments and sharing some of what you're up to. And just to really point out that this is one place you'll get information. I think vegetable gardening is one of those beautiful things that you're going to learn more and more over time. And I hope this is one class you take, and I hope you take lots more classes. So I'm sharing what I've experienced, what I know, but I mean, everyone in this chat maybe even has a lot to share from their experience and what they've learned from doing it. So like to point out the challenges first, because once we can identify what are the things that make this hard to do, then we can turn them into, I like to think of it as how do we turn our challenges into opportunities. So challenges gardening in the desert, if you're putting vegetables directly into the ground, we have big trouble with soil quality. That is like how quickly is water draining out of our soils? What are the nutrients available in our soils? Are the soils appropriate for vegetable growing that we have in the desert, in the Sonoran Desert? Then there's this caliche, which is, if you haven't heard of it, think of like a naturally forming cement in our soils. So that is just like for vegetable gardens, for veggies, their root system of vegetables are not going to break through a layer of caliche. Some of our native plants can push through layers of caliche, but your tomato plants, your pepper plants are not going to be growing through that. So that caliche is just kind of an impervious layer for water, and then it's a stopping point for your veggies. So if you run into caliche, you'll either have to break through it or maybe plan to raise your garden up so that the root systems can grow deep before they hit the caliche. Pests are another challenge. Generally a summertime issue, but there are some that are active all year round. Limited rain, that's not a surprise, except for on Friday, Saturday, I know there was a great storm. So was nice to see, but yeah, most of the year we have very limited rain, and then hot. Still hot this time of year. So we all are living that right now. So, a lot of these things, those challenges, I think can be addressed with just site planning and prep, thinking about where the garden's going to go and considering things like your sun exposure and how much shade you're getting, what kind of soil you're going to, introducing your plants to, access to water. So what are your water sources? Are they close to your vegetable garden? Are they far away? And then really asking yourself, like, how much food do you need to grow? And knowing that this is like, a learning experience, maybe starting small and going from there. So learning on a small scale and then getting bigger. And So really like starting at the very beginning point, and this can go for like a lot of home projects in your space, is create a map for yourself, like an aerial map. GIS or Maricopa Maps is like a place you can search your address and get an aerial image. You can use Google Earth. You can use Google Maps. You can just hand draw, like draw out your property lines and then draw out, your house and maybe mark out where your trees are, what's your parking area, any shed or other buildings you have on your space. And then start to just mark down information like how does water move off of your roof of your house? What are your walkways and pathways that you use on a regular basis, coming and going from your house? What maybe in your backyard there's gathering areas where you like to have people sitting around. Marking your utilities, so thinking about what's underground, out of sight underground that you might not want to put a tree on top of or a vegetable garden on top of. And then thinking about seasonal changes in sunlight and also prevailing wind direction. Wind is a secret factor that really can dry out our vegetable gardens. Just wind, it really dries things out. So jumping in a little bit to the sun part of that planning is different times of year, the sun is sitting in the sky at different points. So on the left side there, that is how the sun moves through the sky in the winter. So we're getting more and more. The sun is not sitting high in the sky; it's lowering slowly as we get closer to December. And also, the sun is rising as we get closer to the winter solstice. The sun is rising farther and farther south of east, and it's setting farther south of west. So it's just sitting lower in the sky. Transitioning to the summertime, the sun rises north of east. It travels all to a really high point in the sky, which is why in the summertime we don't have a lot of shade cast in our landscapes. It's really the wintertime you see lots of shade produced. Whereas in the summer, the sun's directly over our head and it's just beaten down. And then the sun will set in the west, north of west in the summertime. So it's just the sun in the summertime is spending a lot more time in the sky, and it's the direct sunlight is hitting a lot more parts of our landscape in the summer. And that's something to plan for. So here's just a little map showing, just noting how do you mark down, your hot spots and your cold spots, and what are, the advantages are if you're trying to grow a winter garden, or the advantages and disadvantages are if you're trying to grow a winter garden, you don't want that winter garden to be on the north side of your property because it might be getting totally shaded by your house in the winter time. So a winter garden, you want to put that somewhere where it's not going to have shade cast on it. In the summertime, putting your summertime garden in your south part of your property, it is going to get hit by a lot of intense sunlight. And so you need to plan ahead to think about how are you going to protect that vegetable garden when it's getting that really intense solar heat. And then also factoring in just like the radiating heat. So like, what are the hot spots? Places you're parking your car, places you have like a gravel, any walls you have around your property, those are all going to be radiating heat in the evening. So they're going to be hot during the day and then radiating heat in the evening. And that means drying your plants out and drying the soils out. Another thing to look at is just as you're looking at what plants you want to put in the ground, what you want to harvest and grow, is looking into what sun exposure they like to have. So some plants will be identified as liking full sun, partial shade, or full shade. And then also how many sun hours do they like to have? Some will, like having 8 sun hours, 6 sun hours, and that just means how many hours of direct sunlight do they want to have during the day. Those are things that you'll usually see on the packet of seeds, or something you can search online, and it'll give you an idea of like, okay, placing a certain plant in an area where it's getting 6 hours of sunlight might be exactly what it wants, and that's great. So here's a fully filled out site map. There's a lot going on here. But this is all just like, collect information, make observations about your property, and then start to take actions and plan your projects. So thinking about, like, what are the hot spots in your landscape? Where are the places that are getting a lot of shade in the winter time. Think about your water sources. Where are all your hose bibs and spigots? How is water shedding off of your roof? Thinking about wind, wind is coming from different directions, different time of the year. In the monsoon season, I believe it's coming a lot from the southwest. And I forget where it's coming from in the summertime and the winter, but those are things you can look up. And then wildlife, that is one that I have learned I need to be more cautious of. But if, you know, javelina love vegetable gardens, squirrels, rabbits, lots of critters are hungry for what you're growing. And then, yeah, the other ones, pollution, views, utilities, community. Those are all, yeah, just influencing factors, things to think about. How are people walking by your property? Maybe you want to grow a vegetable garden in your front yard because then your neighbors walking by might be tempted to pick a pepper, pick a tomato, and that's really a nice thing to offer to your community. Okay, evapotranspiration. So like to point this out as just an important term to connect with, because this is the thing that's drying our gardens out and taking the water away from our veggies. Evapotranspiration is evaporation and transpiration. Evaporation is water coming off of surfaces like your soils. Water evaporates off of the cement, concrete, you know, any flat surface, water will evaporate over time, and that's because of heat and wind. Then there's transpiration. Plants transpire in order to photosynthesize. And so that's plants actually letting a little bit of water out of their leaves as they're taking in sunlight and trying to create it, turn it into carbon so that they grow. So we have evaporation and transpiration are both these active ways that water is leaving your garden. And the way to protect from that is by putting in shade and putting in wind buffers into the garden. And what you're really doing is you're creating little microclimates. Pictured on the right, I think that's a cool image. The Palo Verde tree acting as a nurse tree or creating a microclimate for the saguaro growing there. And so that's just the Palo Verde is providing shade for the saguaro. It's probably helping store more moisture in the soils because it's providing shade to the soils. It's the Palo Verde's root system is probably helping sink more moisture and wetness into the soil. So just that idea that like having a dense vegetation and having kind of layers of canopy, so like different heights where plants are providing shade, that is all going to be benefiting and creating a more comfortable space for your vegetable garden and probably for you walking through your yard and harvesting those veggies. So microclimates, you can create them through the natural way of growing trees and growing canopy in your landscape. That won't happen overnight. So if you need something set up over a weekend, creating some kind of shade structure is a really good approach. Here's two shade structures, one in a community garden pictured on the right. So we see a big wooden structure and there's shade cloth sitting over top of it. So that shade cloth is providing its biggest benefit in the afternoon when the sun is, you know, in the summertime when the sun is highest in the sky and just providing, you know, giving direct sunlight to the plants. That shade cloth is protecting those veggies. Picture on the left is a backyard garden, but the same idea, shade cloth over the veggie garden and the growing beds. Those shade structures were kind of covering multiple beds at once. You can also create shade structures that are just meant to be placed over top of individual beds. This image on the right is a raised bed with some PVC pipe, I think half-inch PVC pipe that they attached to the sides of the garden bed, and then they were hanging shade cloth over top of that. Another nice thing about shade cloth, not something we're going to come across very much in the Sonoran Desert, but if you are in an area that gets cold, maybe cold snaps and potentially freezes, that shade cloth can also serve as a protector for really cold nights where we might see frost happening. That helps protect your plants from frost. The image on the left, that is another community garden. They have the shade cloth over the direct garden bed, so they're shading each row individually. But I think this image, it doesn't quite capture exactly what's happening, but the trees on either side of these gardens here are helping provide shade from the summer sun when it's rising north of east. The trees are providing shade, just giving a little bit of reprieve for the vegetables before the sun gets directly in the sky. And then the trees kind of branches showing on the right side are protecting the vegetable gardens from the setting sun. So it's just those trees are shortening the amount of time those plants are getting direct sunlight. And then as for wind buffers, so this image here is taken facing south, and that's when a lot of our wind is coming from the south west in the monsoon seasons, but having like just vegetation all around your landscape, vegetation that's growing, I mean, probably just as high as you are, maybe 4 to 6 feet tall. That's all you need to create a wind buffer to help protect your vegetable gardens. So doing like growing shading or screening shrubs, building a wall. So that's like what we see in the back of that property is just a wall that's providing a wind buffer. And then just lots of shade around that's helping break up the wind. Oops. Another approach for reducing evaporation, so that's the water coming off of our soils, leaving our soils because of direct sunlight, because of heat, is putting in organic soil covers or organic mulch. Mulch is just a general term for any ground cover. So you can have a rock mulch. I like to focus on organic mulches because organic mulches are providing not only protection for your soils from sunlight, but also potentially nutrients that will, as those mulches break down after it rains, they're providing nutrients into the soil. So just some options for organic soil covers or mulch, organic mulches. Straw is a good one. That's what we have in this picture here is a bed covered in straw. Great for moisture retention. It will control the temperature of the soils because that straw is receiving the direct sunlight, not your soils where the root system of the plants are. Straw is not going to provide a lot of nutrients to your veggie garden. It's not going to break down very much. So it's also great because you can reuse it year after, many seasons in a row and not need to replenish it. Wood chips are not great for vegetable gardens. Not to say that they're like extremely harmful, but generally with vegetable gardens, you want to create a soil environment that's heavy in bacteria. And wood chips are more prone to creating a very fungal rich environment. So if you think like, if you've ever seen a layer of like wood chips and pulled it back and seen like white webbing growing through it, that's mycelium, that's fungus. And those wood chips are doing a great job encouraging that fungal growth. Vegetable gardens, veggie plants are happier in bacteria rich soils. And so they're not that they're harmed by fungus, but they're not, it's not complementing what they want as much as creating a bacteria-rich environment. So putting in things like grass clippings is really good. That's a really nitrogen-rich source for the plants. So it's helping add nitrogen into the soils anytime it rains. If you are, I'm trying to think of other soil amendments, just being aware of the different quality, like alfalfa is also a great soil mulch cover because it breaks down over time and is providing nutrients. Knowing how long your organic mulch has been composted, so things like hay, hay has a lot of seeds in it, and unless it's had time to compost and the seeds to break down, what you'll see is once you put hay over top of your veggie garden, all the seeds from the hay will start to sprout up and you'll need to pick all those out. So I think, straw is great for moisture retention. It's not going to grow any seeds as far as I know. And then grass clippings, also good. So just being aware of what you're putting in your garden as a mulch, wood chip, or organic mulch. Another thing I'll point out, I don't think I have another slide that'll say this, is this is a bed that we were prepping. And so what we did is like a week or two before we planned to put veggies in this bed, we added all of our compost and added all of our like soils that we wanted to grow the plants in. And we just let things sit for a while. We watered it some. And what we wanted to do is we wanted to give the soils time, because we had a lot of nutrients and compost in that. We wanted to give the soils time just to get start to activate and for that life inside the soils to start to get busy, breaking things down, so that when we put our seedlings or our little starts in the garden in that bed, that those starts are going right into a soil that's already active and alive and rich. And so if you're prepping your beds, doing it like a week or two before you're putting the veggies in, and then putting a cover over top of it to hold moisture in there is just good, because it's kind of like giving the soils time to jumpstart before the veggies are going in. Okay, so that was that was talking a lot about cover material. Now thinking about the places where you can put your gardens. So options of where to set your roots down. Planting containers, I think there are all shapes and sizes of containers. We have two different types shown on the left. The top barrel style, that's really great for conserving space. If you're in a tight space, that you are maximizing vegetable growth, having a barrel container like that. Picture on the bottom left is a raised garden bed. There's wooden types, there's metal ones, there's a lot of different materials you can use. The pros generally to using a container is that you get to really have a say in what soil is going into that raised bed. You also have a say in where that is going. You assemble it and put it where you want it. And then also just long-term harvesting and growing things, by bringing the garden up towards you, bringing the plants up towards you with a raised container, you're not needing to bend over as much, kneel over. So just might reduce some strain on your body and make it easier to harvest things. The cons of raised containers is that you're going to need a lot more irrigation, because you are raising the soil up and kind of like creating a raised area where the sun can just heat up the little container that you have. Using metal as like the planting container is going to really heat your soils up. Wood is slightly cooler, but really it's like all the surface that's exposed there from those raised beds, that's all just getting hit by direct sunlight and it's heating up. So you'll definitely need more irrigation. And then it's just a bigger upfront investment, because you're purchasing the container, but also you need to buy all the soil that's going to go into it. So that's all just a big upfront cost. With the raised containers, what you're going to want to plan for is having 12 to 18 inches of rich soil. So that's all a depth that I'd say majority of veggies plants are not going to grow roots much deeper than that. Plan for drainage. So as you're picking out the soils you're going to use, make sure you're getting a soil that's going to drain well. And then also, in that raised 55-gallon drum, that picture on the top left, drilling holes in the bottom of that, or even probably with that container, maybe even filling the bottom of that, maybe bottom 6 inches to 10 inches of that drum with just a gravel, so that water can drain out into the gravel, and then drilling holes in the bottom of that container. We want to make sure that the soils are getting the opportunity to drain, so you don't just have roots growing in mucky, wet soil. And then for the picture on the bottom left, that there's probably a point where you're going from your raised container soil to your desert soil. And so you want to do some work to make sure that your desert soils are able to drain, so that you're not just watering your veggies and then all the water just sits on the bottom in that space in between your garden soil and your native soil. So doing some kind of soil amendment, or just doing a percolation test, seeing how quickly water sinks into your soils, will give you an idea of how good the drainage is. And then pro tip, so this is kind of pointing out the thing I mentioned earlier. is, in between seasons, cover your soils, keep your soils, keep treating them like they're alive and they're living ecosystem. We want your vegetable garden to be really rich with microorganisms in the soils. Here's a little raised garden bed, so a little cattle trough. And what we have here is the homeowner is choosing to just put a lot of organic material that they haven't even really like shredded. So like putting in like little branches. I think those are a bunch of maybe those are the last year's harvest from his garden, or maybe some clippings from different vegetables or plants around his garden. So he's lining the bottom few inches of that container with that large organic material, and part of that is just to save cost, so that you're not needing to buy all the composted and organic soils to fill the entire container, that you're just filling it with some on-site material first. And the nice thing is all that stuff that he's stepping on there is organic material, so it's going to break down over time and it's going to provide nutrients to your veggies. And then we see him here, probably before seeds are even in the bed, he's wetting that the soils, and then the next step he would want to do is cover them with some kind of cover material so that he's starting to kickstart the living things in those soils. Then another option of where you can set your roots is to do a sunken garden bed. Pros to that are it's better soil moisture retention. You can start to use water harvesting principles, so sinking your garden bed and creating somewhat of a low point. Maybe you can direct water from your roof, or kind of create some gradient, some high points and low points in your yard to get water from one point in your yard to move towards your veggie garden. You're potentially going to have a lower upfront cost. Some of that might be just an additional amount of labor that goes into prepping your sunken garden beds. And then you'll have a natural wind buffer. The soil moisture retention, it's better because one, it's closer to the ground, so the wind passing by is not going to have as large of an effect on creating a drying effect. And then also the sun is not just heating a small little section of soil. Like the sunlight would need to heat all this soil area to warm up the ground. And it's, the sun does have a heating effect even in a sunken bed, but it's a lot less than our container gardens or raised gardens. The con to doing a sunken garden is the gardening in desert soil. Desert soils are great at growing native plants, but they're not great at growing vegetables that are not from the desert. So generally desert soils are very alkaline, which just means they're create an environment that it's hard for plants to take up nutrients, vegetable plants to take up nutrients. You're going to want to plan to add an awful lot of organic material like compost, manure. Manure is another thing to make sure you know where you're getting your manure from. Horse manure is going to be slightly lower quality than cattle manure, because horse manure, all the things the horses are eating, when they're digesting, they're probably not breaking down all the seed material. So there might be seeds in the horse manure you're getting, unless it's been composted and processed. Whereas cattle manure, they have more stomachs to digest the seeds and all the food they're eating. So it's less likely you'll be getting seeds in that manure. Dig deep in your, if you're doing a sunken bed, to try and find any caliche. I'd say digging like 18 to 20 inches to 18 to 24 inches, just to make sure you don't have any layer that's preventing drainage. Ideally, you want to see drainage at a rate of 1 to 4 inches per hour. So if you pour water on the ground, or create a little 12-inch by 12-inch hole in the ground and fill it up, how quickly is that water dropping, or how much water is dropping every hour is the way you can look at it. Things you can do to kind of help with drainage in desert soils. So adding sand to a clayey soil is effective in helping increase drainage. I was reading that adding sawdust to a clay soil can also help with drainage, or vice versa. If it's a very sandy soil, there's really fast drainage. Adding sawdust to that will help retain the moisture. I think that with sawdust, the thing to consider is sawdust is really gonna take away a lot of the nitrogen in your soil. So if you're adding something like sawdust, which is tying up the nitrogen, you're gonna also wanna add something that is making nitrogen available to the soils. So you have sand and sawdust that can help with clayey soils that are slow draining. And then as for sandy soils, and cocoa noir is another thing. That's something that, probably a high cost, but cocoa noir is great for adding soil moisture retention for or for sandy soils, or helping create drainage for clayey soils. So that's probably the most expensive option of those three, but it is very effective. Here's a little sunken garden, and you see a tank in the top left there, kind of in the background. And that tank, the pipe that's sticking out of that, that's the overflow for the tank. So when that tank fills up high enough, water will start spilling out of the pipe, and you see it's wrapping around, and it's actually watering that whole sunken bed there. And if you look close, you can actually see some squash growing. So just a shout out to whoever said that it's easy to grow zucchini. Yeah, this is all just squash growing in a sunken bed here. They do have an irrigation line, so it's not just growing off of the rainwater coming out of the tank. There's that black line running through this space to probably provide regular irrigation. But a great design there, where you're taking water from a tank that's overflowing and putting that water to another beneficial use. Okay, now that was all planning for, prepping your garden beds, prepping the garden beds, thinking about location of your gardens. Now we're going to get into irrigation. And so, one thing for irrigation is think about where your water sources are, and are they easy to get to in relation to where you're needing to water. That especially goes for if anyone's thinking about a rain tank or has a rain tank. Siting your vegetable garden, or like anything you're trying to water, very close to your rain tank is a really good design, because then it encourages you and reminds you to use the water from your tank to grow those plants. I'll talk about identifying I've already shared water sources. I'm going to show some materials and ones that are good for helping with water savings. And then something that you'll want to think about is like creating an irrigation schedule. So first, with pressurized water, this is the water that's coming out of our hose bibs, the water we're used to using in our gardens. That water, when you turn on your hose bib, is coming out generally 40 to 50 pounds per square inch, or PSI. That's, good water pressure. Oftentimes our irrigation systems need a pressure reducer. So the water's coming out of your hose bib at 40 to 50 PSI. You want to attach something that reduces that pressure to closer to like 20 to 30 PSI, pounds per square inch. That's pressurized versus unpressurized or tank water. Tanks, at the very most, you'll probably see a tank have about 3 PSI, and that is all dependent on the height of how tall your tank is and how much water is in it. If you're planning to irrigate with a rain tank, because you have such a low pressure, the trick becomes you need to think about what components you purchase that are going to accommodate that very low pressure. And that just means staying with large fittings and large tubing that's carrying that water, so that there's less friction and more space for the water to travel through. Here are some irrigation materials that I'm used to working with. So pictured here on the bottom, we have, these bulleted items are listed from your water source. Here are the steps of what materials go in order. So from your hose bib, you'll put in your irrigation timer. That's going to be the thing that, turns water on or off to be watering your landscape. Then you'll put in the pressure reducer. So that's taking you from that city water pressure down to the 20 to 30 PSI. And then generally, I I think working with 1/2-inch poly tubing is a good option. There is larger tubing. There's 3/4 inch, and then probably even there's 1-inch poly tubing. I think with the pressurized system and for most size gardens, 1/2 inch is fine. So that 1/2-inch poly tubing is kind of like carrying the water through your landscape, and then you can use a 1/4 inch or spaghetti tubing is what it's usually called. And that is actually the thing that is open on the end and actually emits the water, puts the water into around the soil where your plants are. So on the bottom picture there, the larger black tubing, that's 1/2-inch tubing. And then coming off of that tubing, the thinner tubing is spaghetti. And then you can purchase different emitters that will determine how much water is coming out of that spaghetti tubing. We have 3 different colors on the top left: the blue, red, and black. And each of those colors represent a different amount of water per hour. They're rated in gallons per hour. With vegetable gardens, I think, any garden that you have, you want to probably do like a deep soak. You don't want to just water things a few minutes every single day. You would want to water things deeply to encourage root growth. And so, that's a thing to consider. The flag emitters, the green flag parts there, that's just another type of emitter that controls how much water comes out per gallon. Yeah, that's all I'll say. You can use PVC as another material you can use with irrigation. That's a much more expensive material, but it's going to last a long time. So options. Other things that are good and work well with pressurized water, so water coming from your hose bib, using either a drip tape or a gridded drip tape. So the picture on the bottom is an example of the gridded drip tape. That's good for what is growing in that container there is sweet potatoes. And so that's something that's going to grow and like vine an awful lot. And so we use grid drip tape to try and kind of wet the whole bed instead of just spot areas. Pictured on the top is a drip tape that has like holes in varying places. You can kind of see the little openings along the brown spaghetti line there. And so those are spaced at specific distances, maybe 6 inches apart or 12 inches apart. They could probably be 24 inches apart. And you'd buy different tape with setting the holes in different lengths in order to, and the reason you do that is to, depending on what kind of plant you're growing. So, tomato plants need a lot more space to grow than little basil plants. So the spacing of those holes, the thing that makes you decide what size you're going to get is the size of the plants you're putting in. And all that tubing there, the tubing that has spaced out holes, that is good to use with the 1/2-inch poly. So that just taps into 1/2-inch poly tubing. Now, before talking about rain tank water and options for watering with it, does anyone have a rain tank or anyone considering installing a rain tank? See someone raise their hand. I take that as a yes, either considering or has one. Okay, I see another raised hand. Take that as a yes. Cool. All right, so some tank curious people. That's great to see. This is a great class for you to be taking because rain tanks are fantastic, but it's really important to know what you're working with. Rain tanks, that's free water coming to your tank. Rainwater is a fantastic water source. I'd say it's a better water to water the landscape with than our city water. But you have to think about, tanks are low pressure and how do we work with that low pressure? And Laura, I would think we're at a point, should we take a pause answer any questions that have come in the chat.
Yeah, I was thinking now everyone can take about 5 minutes for a break. Go ahead and put your questions in the chat. We have a few from earlier, and then we can answer them after a super quick break if that works for you, Charlie. Oh, sorry, I don't think your audio.
Oh, sorry, I muted myself.
There you go. Yep.
We could, should we say everyone gets back together like 6:55, 6:54?
Yeah, that works. 6:55.
It's 6:54.
All right. See you guys all in a second.
In a sec.
Okay, if everyone's ready to circle back now, it looks like we have 3 questions, comments that we might want to address right now. The first one was asking about mosquito factor, so how to deal with mosquitoes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. And I think that one popped up in the rain tank. Rain tank pictures. So rain tanks, like, I think rain tanks have a reputation for being mosquito habitat. And I'd say that any tank that is growing mosquitoes is not installed well. A good installation for a rain tank shouldn't attract mosquitoes or any pests. And you shouldn't have to use like water, there's like mosquito dunks that you can purchase. Like someone shouldn't have to be using mosquito dunks on a regular basis to keep mosquitoes out of the tank. I'm going to go back a few slides and we might see where, there we go. So doing things to prevent mosquitoes or critters or anything from accessing the water in the tank is really the trick. So the overflow pipe that we see for the tank there, the very end of it has what's called a backflow valve. And so that has a little flap inside of it that sits closed and lets water go out away, drain out of it, but then it closes and doesn't let anything enter in. There's other options for the overflow pipe of the tank. There's other options for keeping that sealed when you don't want anything entering, but flowing and open when water's moving. And then as for these basin area here that is receiving that overflow water, from what I know about mosquitoes, they are supposed to take 5 to 7 days from larval point to becoming a mosquito. And there has to be access to standing water for those 5 to 7 days. A well-planned basin should not have standing water in it I would say for more than 12 to 24 hours. Different cities will have code around this where you can't have standing water for more than a certain amount of time. And so for this basin here, what I would want to see, and this would be planning ahead, is like them doing some kind of test to see how long water is sitting, how quickly it's sinking into the ground. And then they should be planning the size of their basin, or really the depth of their basin, how deep it is, based on how quickly the water infiltrates into the ground. Hopefully that answers the question. If that spurred another question, I'm happy to try and answer that.
Cool. We have another one too. I had moderately good results with cherry tomatoes last year. Any tips for cherry tomatoes?
Cherry tomatoes. The only thing, so I think fertilizing it with a liquid fertilizer, and I'm trying to remember the best time. So like right as they're sprouting their first 2 leaves, little sprouts, giving them a little bit of like liquid fertilizer, then like a fish emulsion, I think, or like a liquid like kelp, is good. And then also I think it's like right as their flowers are budding is another time to give them a little bit of fertilizer, and that's like a liquid fertilizer. I think is really good, especially for us in the desert, because you don't need it's like all the nutrients are mixed in with the water, and so your water's infiltrating through the soils and immediately getting to the root system. And then a lot of the liquid fertilizer are also organic. And then the other thing I know about cherries is like start them as early as possible, because once we get into the 100, or I think it's once it's over 90 degrees, if they're flowering and it's over 90 degrees, their like pollen becomes ineffective. And it's like, I have a very clear memory of a summer where I was growing all these cherry tomatoes in my front yard, and they all flowered in like a week where it was 100 degrees for like 5 days straight, and none of them grew tomatoes because it was too hot for the flowers and the pollen to intermingle. So yeah, start them early, and starting them inside is, or like in a climate controlled place, and trying to get them grown from inside, and then putting them in the ground is a way to start early.
Cool. Interesting. I think the follow-up to this cherry tomato question we just got is that the same with cucumbers?
Um, I haven't run into that same thing with cucumbers. The thing I've heard about cucumbers is, and I think this is, I definitely cucumbers, maybe zucchini too, is the flowers on those cucumbers and zucchinis sometimes are like really big and floppy. And I think some of our pollinator, bees, um, aren't able to get inside and like actually get access to the pollen. And so if you hand pollinate, like grab a Q-tip and take a little bit of pollen from the flowers and like touch the stamens of each of the flowers just to spread the pollen out, then you're like hand pollinating it, and that's like going to ensure that fruit should be growing from there. So that's the only thing I've heard is like sometimes pollinators can't get access to the flowers because they're so big and droopy.
Cool. And this is more of a comment someone said, but they said, I was glad you brought up sunken beds. I recently came across this and I'm considering it as part of my landscape remodel for my backyard. So super cool that was brought up.
Awesome. Oh, great. Yeah, sunken beds. I think it's a really good, like, I mean, it's kind of like incorporating some traditional farming practices into your landscape. So I think it's a cool like connection to like the historic cultivation of our lands. This is like some of the things that were practiced and continue to be practiced. So it's cool, but it is it's a lot of bending over. So buy yourself one of those little foam pads to set your knees on, or find some short kids that will happily harvest, kids that are shorter, closer to the ground.
Unless you got any private comments, that was all that I have in the chat for now.
Great. I don't see any. Mosquitoes, yeah. Okay, yeah, I think we're good to roll on. Thanks everyone for asking questions. And yeah, don't hesitate to ask more in the chat. That is something I really enjoy, is getting questions. Getting us up to the spot where we stopped. Okay, yeah, so rain tanks. Exciting to hear some people are either tank curious or have a rain tank. So gravity-based irrigation. I'm not going to cover any rain tank systems that have pumps attached to them. I'll say like attaching a pump to your rain tank opens up potentially a whole mess of permits and code. I'm speaking like based in Tucson, but I'm fairly confident this is something you'd run across in a lot of different counties and a lot of different cities throughout Arizona. Is the moment you put a pump on a rain tank in Tucson, you are required to get a backflow preventer, install a backflow preventer on your water meter. And so that's regardless of how the irrigation system is set up, regardless of what is connected where. It's the second a pump is placed on your rain tank, it's city code to have that backflow preventer. I'm confident that that's also the case in Phoenix as well. That is a whole separate class and a high cost, but there's an awful lot you can do just with gravity-based rain tank systems. So just letting water go downhill. In the picture here, we have what's called a slimline tank. That's that kind of waffly, square-looking tank off in the distance there. And that slimline tank, it's really nice to go along like sides of like houses, like your side yard, because it's narrow, it's small, it's not taking up a lot of like footprint. They are a more expensive tank, so there's much more like affordable options for rainwater storage, but the Slimline is a cool way to fit rainwater in a funny narrow space. And that Slimline tank, we have it plumbed, so there's a little fitting on the bottom of the tank that you can't see, but we have run a 2-inch PVC pipe underground, and then we're popping that pipe up out of the ground in this separate area. So we're kind of giving access to the rain tank water several feet, probably like 15 to 20 feet away from where that water is actually, like where the penetration in the tank is for getting water out of the tank. And that's nice for this homeowner, because where this hose bib is now is going to be right next to 2 fruit trees that they're growing up. They're going to get a fig tree and a pomegranate tree. And so they wanted their hose bib to be real close to those trees and real easy to access. Notice that some things to note for this is in our, planning ahead. So we have a very low pressure system. And so we're working with 2-inch PVC pipe. That is specifically to do as little flow restriction as possible. Larger pipe is just going to not have as much friction and not reduce the movement of the water as much. And it's not until we get to the very end where we have that hose bib that we narrow the water from a 2-inch pipe to then the 3/4-inch hose bib. Few other pictures I'll show. Talking about hose bibs, so hose bib, that's the thing that you open and close, and if you have your hose bib next to your house, you turn it on and water starts just like gushing out. That's the 40 to 50 psi, so 40 to 50 psi water coming out of your hose bib that's attached to city water. And the hose bib pictured on the top left, that like narrow, that small opening, that is the type of hose bib that we can connect to our pressurized city lines, because it's 40 to 50 pounds per square inch of water pushing through that tiny opening, and we have lots of flow. For a rain tank, because it is such a low pressure system, again, it's like maximum probably 3 psi that you have with a rain tank, you want to use what's called a full port hose bib, or full port hose bib or full port valve. And you can see the difference in diameter. There's just a lot more, the much bigger opening for the water to flow through. I'll say, like, if you have a little 50-gallon bucket, or 50-gallon barrel or something you bought from Home Depot or Lowe's, and you're not satisfied with how quickly water is coming out of it, I think getting a full port hose bib is like the very first upgrade you can make to getting more water flow out of any rainwater storage you have. So full port hose bib is what you want for the tank versus a regular hose bib for city water. Other things that are good to have for a tank installation is just a general, like pictured on the bottom there, coming out of the bottom of the tank. So there's that black fitting that's sitting right up against the tank. That's called a bulkhead. So that's what's actually is the opening where water from inside the tank is getting out of the tank, and it's passing through that bulkhead there. Then we have a ball valve that you can open and close. And so that can shut off access to the tank water right there, open, close. And by having the ball valve there, if you ever have an issue, with your 2-inch PVC pipe or your hose bib fitting or anything else, you can close that 2-inch ball valve, where that blue valve, you can close that there and then do any work downstream of that point and not be draining your tank. And then just knowing, like, planning to have access to the water. Maybe you have multiple places where in one area you're able to connect a hose to your tank, and then in another area you have it set to connected to irrigation, like an irrigation timer. Here are some more fun things for using with a rain tank. So the tank that has the kind of Y, that green Y coming out of it, what's on the left side is a low pressure irrigation timer. So because tanks are low pressure, generally you have to buy everything with that idea of low flow in mind. So that timer there is called a Toro timer. It's a zero pressure timer. There's other brands, but Toro is the one that we were using a lot. several years ago. But yeah, lots of other options. Just make sure you buy a low pressure, zero pressure irrigation timer. Then on the right side, that's where they have the hose bib, or sorry, the hose connection. So you have irrigation on one side and hose on the other. Another cool thing you can do with rain tanks is you can, pictured on the top left, those are little Oya balls, and you can use rainwater and feed Oya balls with that. So Oya balls you can sit into your soil, and they're a porous clay. They're like an unfinished clay, and you just keep your tank open with water flowing into those balls, and they slowly water permeates out of them and it wets the soils, and then you plant vegetables or plants all around those balls there. If you're wanting to do like a general irrigation setup from your tank, pictured on the bottom left are these like those little ball valves, those little green top things. Those are 1/2-inch ball valve emitters, and those are a really nice part for creating an irrigation system with your tank, because you can open and close those as much as you want. And so that's kind of like you can fine tune your irrigation by opening and closing those. And they're 1/2-inch. And so keeping with that 1/2-inch size is just better for a rain tank versus in the images we had, or in the irrigation system we had with the municipal water, I was talking about 1/4-inch spaghetti tubing, really fine tubing. I don't think, I think 1/2-inch is a little bit more accommodating to the rain tank pressure than a 1/4-inch spaghetti. Yeah, here's just another setup. So we have a tank somewhere off in the distance, but then there's this PVC that is being trenched into the ground, and then 2 hose bibs giving this homeowner access to the rain tank water, but at a far distance from where the rain tank is. So I think that's just good designing. The thing with tanks is you're always going to be competing with like our habit of how we grew up, probably, where you're used to just going to this your hose bib that's connected to pressurized water and turning that on to water your garden, and you're not thinking about your rain tank. So doing everything you can in your planning process to put your tank somewhere where you're reminded to use it and encouraged to use it before your city water, because that's the whole goal, is to use the rainwater in that tank. So that's all about tanks and irrigation. And now I'm just going to quickly give some ideas and hopefully give some inspiration for what you can put in your garden. And so starting just with the seasonality we are working with here in the Sonoran Desert, it's October 1st. We are ready to start growing leafy greens. Some of our like kind of what in other parts of the country would be like a spring crop. Like we kind of have like 2 spring seasons here in the Sonoran Desert. So September to December, it's kind of our cool season. Then we have a shoulder season, which is our spring, and you can plant things, and that would be kind of our, I don't say March, maybe, yeah, probably mid-March. And then a warm season, which is, we're saying January to, no, I guess in the middle of January to August. So probably starting around April, and then like very quickly April to really to like the end of September, the end of October. That is our warm and hot season. It's also our monsoon season, but I'd say the warm and hot season is a really tough time for us, especially anyone who's a beginner. Very tough time to grow vegetable gardens, and it's a really unforgiving time to grow something. Here is just a planting list with suggestions for different times of the year. I like this one. I believe this is from Native Seed Search. I think look around, find a planting calendar that inspires you and makes you happy. This is the one that I like, but there are so many out there. Look for one that you like. I like this one because it kind of also points out some of the natives that you can grow and put in the ground. So amaranth, yeah, I won't read through all these. Tomatillo, yeah, some like Sonoran natives or plants that have been cultivated here for a long time. And so I think this is just a cool thing to reference. Now, all thinking about seeds, There are different species that you can put in the ground. So you have annuals that their life cycle is over 1 year or less. So they will, grow from seed, flower, produce whatever you're trying to eat, and then go to seed and die. And like before they die, they've spread their seed with the hope that in the next season that seed will germinate and grow again. And that's how every year a new round of seed is being produced and growing. For those annual species, usually you're harvesting the entire plant when you are starting to getting the food off the plant, and then it'll die after one season. That's like if you're into a no-till type of gardening, so you're doing as much as possible to keep the soils undisturbed. That would be your annuals would be what you like cut the tops off of them and then keep the root system in the ground, and let the root system decompose and break down. Perennial species, those are ones that their life cycle is for more than a year. So the idea is they will come back year after year if you can tend to them throughout the whole year, and they'll continually to produce food seasonally for their lifetime. A fun native I think native or one that's been cultivated for a very long time in the Sonoran Desert is a chiltepine plant. That's a pepper plant that is from the Sonoran Desert. That's a perennial species. It'll keep on growing and producing year after year if you care for it throughout the year. In terms of seeds, you have multiple options and multiple places you can shop around for seeds. Just thinking about your Home Depot, your Lowe's, your like generic store-bought seeds. Those are great because they're really easy to, they are readily available. They're cheap, and they're gonna get you growing food right away. You can go to Home Depot tonight, tomorrow. They're still open. Yeah, you can go there tonight and buy all the seeds you need for your vegetable garden. The thing that's not great about those generic store-bought seeds is one thing is you don't know how it's hard to know how long they've been in storage for, and also those seeds are typically not from plants that have been cultivated in our desert climate. So maybe those are like tomato seeds that are coming from like Wisconsin and then being delivered here. Those tomatoes that were grown in Wisconsin are not used to the Sonoran Desert, so they just aren't quite, they're going to be facing a real shock, some new experiences starting to grow here. And that's versus comparing and kind of contrasting to heirloom seeds. Heirloom seeds are usually seeds from plants that have been cultivated in a region, or in the Sonoran region for us. There's usually like a cultural significance to them. Maybe they're a seed that have been passed down from generations between families or within a family. They will a lot of times have like a distinct flavor or color or growth habit. And a really neat place to search and see what is like a whole catalog of heirloom seeds that are from the Sonoran Desert would be looking at Native Seeds Search, their website. They work with farmers all across Arizona, and they have seeds that it's like they're getting seeds from plants and food producing plants that have been grown here in the desert for dozens of years, hundreds of years. And so those seeds over time, those plants are getting used to our hot climate and our dry summers. And so they're just a little bit more tolerant of the conditions we're in. So these are really great seeds because I think they just have a little more story to them, but they're, much more limited ways of getting them, and then they're coming at a higher cost. And also there's like research to do. It's not like there's so many different seeds to learn about and read about. It can be a little bit overwhelming knowing where to start. And now just shout out to some plants that we can be thinking about growing awfully soon. So we're gonna brag about our cool season crops. Starting with our brassicas. So that's the mustard family. So things like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, kale, kohlrabi. I can say I've had a lot of success growing kale and collards. And yeah, personally, that's it for me. I haven't had much luck growing broccoli or Brussels sprouts or cabbage, and I haven't tried cauliflower or kohlrabi. But so if you're a beginner and curious where to start, I find kale and collards being a very inviting and welcoming introduction to vegetable gardening. Then on to our root veggies, things like carrots, radishes, parsnips, beets, turnips. A thing to know about these is it's important to know what kind of soil you're growing these in. I one year tried to grow carrots in very clayey soils, and I didn't do my investigation and realized that it was very clayey, dense soils, and my carrots barely grew. A lot of these root vegetables, they really like to grow in soils that are kind of like looser. So think like a sandy soil, because they want to have an easy time like kind of pushing the soil away so they can grow bigger and bigger. So your root vegetables are happier in slightly sandier soils so that it's easier for them to grow underground. Radishes are really cool because they have such a quick turnover from seed to when you get a radish. I want to say some radishes, they'll grow like between like 40 and 90 days from seed to radish. I know one of my coworkers was excited last weekend because he was starting to put radishes in the ground. Then alliums, those are things like onion, garlic, and bunch onion. Also I don't have much, or I've grown a little bit of garlic. There is a native onion to this region that I meant to add to this slide. If someone knows the name of it in the chat, please shout it out. It's something like Itoli. I probably butchered that name, but it's a native onion. It's a bunching onion so you can grow that and just take off a little bit, kind of like grab what you need and want to eat. And then because it's a bunching onion, it'll continue to grow and bunch and get bigger and bigger as long as you don't take all of it out of the ground. Native Seed Search would have the exact onion. I'm thinking of the one that's native here. That's it. I ate whole. I toy. Onion. Thank you to whoever dropped that in the chat. Appreciate that. Then we have greens. So lettuce, spinach, arugula, chard. I've personally had luck with arugula and chard. I find them to be as friendly as your kale and collards. These are ones that if you're in an area that is known to get a little bit of a frost or cold, a lot of our leafy greens, like people will say that it's kind of having them experience a cold snap will actually add a little bit more flavor to the leaves of them. So fun way to add some flavor to all these leafy greens you see here. Herbs, parsley, dill, mint, sage, tarragon. There's lots more than that. I think an herb garden is really fun to grow inside. I was reminded of the squirrels that live in my neighborhood because I started to try and grow basil outside on my front porch this weekend, and now it's all gone because of the rabbits, because of the squirrels. So just know that your plants are really tasty for you, but also tasty for any critters that are living close by. So for me, I know I'm going to be growing my herbs inside from now on. And then if you are planning, growing things outside and you do have like pests, making sure you do an awful lot to either give your animal neighbors lots of options of what to eat, and so that they might graze different things but not get all your food, or putting a lot of measures in to prevent them from getting access to the food. I think other than just physical barriers of putting like cages and stuff around your veggie gardens, I think it is a multiple layer way of trying, like just do as much as possible. There's not one solution other than a physical barrier. I've heard of different like predator urine, so like spreading like urine of predators that are going to like repel and scare away any rabbits or small animals. I think that's like one thing, but it should be paired with or matched with probably 3 or 4 other preventive measures to keep pests out. Common issues we're getting close to the end. So common issues, a lot of cold weather crops will get frost damage. That's usually just an aesthetic thing. And as I mentioned earlier, some leafy greens have the reputation of that, like adds a little bit of extra flavor to them if they go through a cold night. To accommodate for that, experiment with your covering, like your covers. So that's like even just using a shade cloth and putting a shade cloth over your garden beds if you're expecting a cold snap is a really good thing to do. Premature bolting, that's when, you know, maybe it gets really cold one night or it's a very hot night. That's when plants they get the signal from temperatures to say, oh, it's about to get very hot and you should grow to seed because it's gonna get too hot for you to survive. And so that premature bolting happens with like a temperature change, signaling the plant to reproduce. So its offspring can grow and prosper. Look into, you know, premature bolting, like a cilantro plant. If your cilantro bolts and it goes to seed, that gives you coriander. And so you can harvest that. And now you not only have a herb, but you have a spice as well. I think for some plants that bolt, you can just snip off the flower, like as it's going to flower, cut it off. And that will prevent it or delay the bolting from happening. The flavor of things change as they bolt. They kind of get more bitter a lot of times, or the texture of the plant will change a little bit and not be as pleasant to eat. There's some cilantro and coriander. Warm season crops, quick rush through these. So peppers are great warm season crops. The chiltepine I mentioned before is our native pepper plant. I think that's a really cool, great spice level. I'd say like habanero level spice, in my opinion, which is really nice. And they're really small, and so the little pepper can go a long way. Also a great gift for someone if you're visiting people that aren't from the Sonoran Desert. I think that's a cool gift, is to get them some chiltepine peppers. Tomatoes, also good summer crop. That tomatoes are the ones that I know if it gets too hot while they're flowering, they won't fruit. So really, like any of our summer crops, I'd say that if you can start them inside earlier, do that so that they are getting to the point where they're going to fruit earlier in the season rather than when it's like 110 degrees outside. Tomatoes, a version of those that have been cultivated locally, tomatillo. Tomatillo plants are like a Sonoran version of tomato, great for salsa. Eggplants, lots of different shape and size eggplants. I'll say know how much food you're growing. I have a clear memory of tomatoes last year growing probably like a dozen tomato plants and having way more tomatoes than I was ready to eat. So we had to can all the tomatoes very quickly so they didn't go bad. 2 years before that, it was growing a whole garden of eggplants and then needing to find something to do with a lot of eggplants. So as you're planning your garden, think about how much you actually want to eat. How much eggplant do you want to eat? Or how many neighbors do you want to give your food to? Cucurbits, that's your cucumber, squash, and melon. I think these are, in my experience, of the summer veggies, these are the easiest ones to grow. And these are really funny because they also grow really quickly once they start to grow. And it's like, it feels like one day you're outside and it's like, you know, just a 8-inch little cucumber. And then like 2 days later you go outside and it's like 1.5 feet. So just keep your eye on those as they're growing because they get big really quickly. Armenian cucumber, I think, is pretty easy to, or is easier than other cucumber varieties to grow. I won't say anything is easy to grow in the summer, but easier, the Armenian cucumber. Common issues in the summertime: sun, water, nutrients. So this is just in general. So yeah, troubleshooting problems could be its own class of like what is a nutrient issue, what is a watering issue, what's just sun damage. Oftentimes yellowing can be a sun issue. It can also be related to not enough nitrogen or too much nitrogen. And then in terms of pests, using row covers will help with some pests. It's like, I think it's a lot of just once you start to see something going wrong, do your research. and know that it might be a multiple approach solution. Not just one thing will solve the problem. It might be many things you have to try out. And then just know that like the essential to all this is treating your soils well, giving water to the micronutrients and all the bacteria in your soils. You can't have a vegetable garden without a lively soil biome. And so really it's like feed your soils with water and nutrients and living things, and then your vegetables can grow in that rich soil. Okay, final tips: siting your garden, water resources, mulch and support pollinators. So again, put your garden close to your water sources. If you don't have a lot of space in your yard, look local. Try and find a community garden where you can do your veggie gardening. I think that's great because there's already probably resources at the community garden, and you can learn from all the other people that have been gardening there. Make some friends and learn about what they've seen work well or not work well. Saving water. So always, encourage everyone to look into what it would look like to get a rain tank for your property. Also, hand watering is a really good practice because it gives you eyes on your vegetable garden on a regular basis, probably a daily basis, which means you'll have a chance to see if anything's going wrong almost every single day, or if things are going well and are ready to harvest. And then when you're irrigating, the best time to irrigate is very early in the morning because that's when your soils are coolest. That gives the water the best chance to sink deep in the soils and get to the root zone. Start small. Start with one container. You don't have to feed the whole neighborhood the first summer you're gardening or the first winter you're gardening. And then just a few Sonoran inspirations, and we'll kind of have this as the last questions. Is there's an awful lot of native edible plants. The Sonoran Desert has, I think it's over 540 native edible plants growing in it. And that's not just our region, but from where we are all the way through to southern Sonora, Mexico. And just on this image here, we have a few of them. So there's barrel cactus, that's the yellow fruiting thing in the bowl there. Then there's the atún, or the prickly pear fruit. Those dried out seed looking things are, I believe that's ironwood. And then desert claw is just kind of off the image there. It's those little hooked green things. Devil's claw is a native, and you can pickle those, and it's very tasty. Pickled devil's claw, really, really good. And pictured on the right there in this sweet little salad, these are all from one of my coworkers' gardens. So all the cherry tomatoes and the basil, and then we harvested the pods, the seeds of ironwood tree, and we steamed it, and so that's ironwood seeds that are on that salad. So people, if anyone wants to comment the last native food they had or native edible they ate, and that will be the end of the class. A little picture of ocotillo tea. You can harvest the flowers of ocotillo tea, and that's it.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Charlie. We thank you all for sticking around. I know I learned a lot as a novice gardener, so I hope you guys learned something too. Please put any questions or comments in the chat while I'm yapping a little bit as we wrap up. If you think of any questions for us later, you can always email. My email is on the WebEx link that you should have gotten in your inbox. It's lara.vanlith@Phoenix.gov if you have any last minute questions. After this, you should be brought to a quick 2-question survey. It's just going to let us know what you liked about the class, maybe what you thought was missing, or what you'd like to see next time. Be sure to join us for our next classes. They're going to be happening every Wednesday in October at 6 p.m. and we're going to go over some really cool topics. So stick around for that next week, and I'll add a few links in the chat now if you guys want to look at more Phoenix resources that can help you get started on a desert landscape or rainwater harvesting. We have a lot of cool resources. We have incentive programs where we'll actually pay you to make changes to save water and money at home. We just want to remind you all that we wouldn't be able to grow if we didn't have water. So keep water in mind and keep growing. I'll put those links in the chat now. Let me see if we have any questions. Will you have a recorded session? I missed a lot. Yeah, no worries. We will have a recorded session. We actually should be able to post this on the City of Phoenix YouTube channel by tomorrow, I was told. That might be ambitious, but hopefully it will be on tomorrow. And we'll also put this on our website. I should be able to email everyone who RSVP'd when we do post these videos, so you guys can check them out after. And then we also got a question, do you have any good recipes for pickling native plants?
So I know things that I have seen pickled are those devil's claw, and then you can pickle the buds of creosote, the little flower buds before they flower. You can pickle those and make a little like creosote caper, little desert capers. I don't know the actual like pickling recipe for it. I just know the things you can pickle. I think you would follow the same pickling approach as like when you do peppers and onions and carrots and stuff.
We also got a question, does early morning watering advice include pre-dawn? Charlie, I don't know if you have any advice about this.
The way I interpret that is just watering before the sun rises. And I'd say yes, that's a great time to water. Yeah, is that
Yeah,
match what you
from
think?
from a water conservation perspective, that's an ideal time to water before the sun comes up and starts sucking up all the water. Pre-dawn or just very early morning and at night as well is a good time. Anything besides midday in the middle of summer would be good. So
I came across a question about, so I think someone might have missed the mosquito question. And it's that, so mosquitoes shouldn't grow, like if you have a tank that's growing mosquitoes, I'd say that there's some enhancements to make. Tanks shouldn't grow mosquitoes. You shouldn't have to use a mosquito dunk in your rain tank. So if you see a neighbor that has mosquitoes growing in their tank, they have something going on that's not quite right, and they could call us and we could coach them or give them some ideas of what's going wrong. And then as for mosquitoes growing in the ground, with rain basins, we want that water to soak into the ground like within 12 to 24 hours. And if there's no pooling water, there's no, mosquitoes need like 5 to 7 days to really go from larval state to mosquito. And so that basin is not going to have standing water for that long. Someone also asked, what is cocoa noir? And I don't know like a very deep technical explanation. So I'll shout what I do know or say what I do know is it's a soil amendment. So thinking on the terms of like peat moss, peat moss is like a really good soil amendment to I think it's like good at holding moisture. But peat moss became like kind of got a bad name because of how it was being harvested. And so people stopped wanting to use peat moss and then transitioned to using cocoa noir. And it's just kind of, I think, like the husky part of a coconut, or like I think it's like the byproduct maybe of like the coconut like processing. If anyone in the chat or if anyone knows, they can correct me if that's off. But it's kind of the fibrous part of the coconut shell, and it's good at holding soil moisture.
cool. Okay, the next class is Sonoran Desert Harvesting on October 8th. So be sure to RSVP for that if you guys want to join. I was gonna say another thing, but now it's totally blanking. So But if you don't have any more questions, you guys can always email us afterwards. Yeah. Anything else to add, Charlie?
No, that's it. David, I don't know if anyone saw David's message. It showed up as private, but cocoa noir, often referred to as cocoa noir, is a natural growing medium made from husks of coconut. It's commonly used as a soil amendment for soilless substrate for growing plants. It's good at holding water and aerating soils. Yeah, that's it. Thanks
Also,
everyone for
next
being.
time I'm gonna change the settings so you can see everyone else's chat, so it's not like you're just shouting out into the void. It's probably better to see everyone else's comments, so that will be changed for the next one.
Awesome.
But yeah, thank you everyone
Thanks,
for
Lara.
joining, and thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, thanks for hosting.
See you next week.